Among all the personality types Carl Jung carefully described over his years of clinical observation, one of them struck him as especially strange, especially gifted, and especially difficult, both for the person living inside it and for everyone around them trying to relate to it. He called this type the introverted intuitive, and he considered it one of the most genuinely visionary and yet one of the most practically ungrounded ways a human mind could be organized. A type capable of extraordinary inner perception while remaining, quite literally, unaware of its own body and its effect on the people standing directly in front of it. Jung observed that this type experiences a continuous and often overwhelming stream of inner images, possibilities, and intuitive perceptions rising up from the depths of the unconscious mind, one after another, in what he described as an inexhaustible abundance. Unlike other types who might pursue a single external ambition or a single tangible goal, the introverted intuitive moves restlessly from image to image, chasing every new inner possibility as it arises, with what Jung called a remarkable and genuinely striking indifference, not toward external objects, since this type may show little interest in those either, but toward their own inner objects as well. The images arrive, are perceived with genuine fascination, and then give way to the next image, without the person ever pausing to ask what any particular image might specifically mean for their own life, their own choices, or their own well-being. This creates a genuinely strange and often difficult pattern that Jung observed repeatedly in his clinical work with this type. The introverted intuitive typically shows very little conscious awareness of their own bodily existence, their own physical needs, or the actual effect their behavior has on the people around them. Jung noted that if this type were struck by a sudden wave of dizziness or physical disturbance, they would characteristically never think to ask whether the image or perception occupying their mind at that moment might have anything to do with their own physical state. The inner images seem to exist for this type almost as though detached from the person entirely, existing in their own right, rather than being understood as messages specifically relevant to the perceiver's own particular situation. What makes this type genuinely difficult to relate to and genuinely difficult to be, according to Jung's careful observation, is that the world of inner images never becomes, for the introverted intuitive, a moral or practical problem the way it does for other types. The images are approached almost entirely as an aesthetic matter, a question of perception and fascination rather than a question of what should actually be done about them or how they connect to ordinary daily responsibility. This means the introverted intuitive can produce extraordinary visionary insight, genuine glimpses of future possibility that other, more practically oriented types would never access, while remaining strikingly unable to translate any of this insight into ordinary, grounded, practical action that accounts for their own physical needs or the genuine feelings of the people depending on them. From the outside, this pattern can look, to more externally oriented people, like a kind of fruitless escape into fantasy, a person seemingly disconnected from reality entirely, giving themselves over to an endless stream of inner perception that produces nothing of immediate practical use. Jung took this criticism seriously as a genuine and understandable observation, but he also insisted it missed something important about the actual value of what this type was doing. The images that flood the introverted intuitive's awareness, however fruitless they might appear from the standpoint of immediate practical utility, represent genuine and often remarkably prescient possible views of situations that have not yet fully developed, glimpses of potential futures and hidden meanings that a more externally grounded mind, focused entirely on immediate, concrete reality, would simply never perceive at all. This offers a genuinely important and often overlooked insight for understanding certain people in your own life, or perhaps for understanding this exact pattern in yourself. If you recognize something of this restless, image-chasing, physically ungrounded quality in your own inner experience, constantly captivated by new inner possibilities and perceptions that seem to arrive faster than you can ever properly process or act upon them, Jung's description suggests this is not simply a character flaw or a failure of discipline to be corrected through willpower alone. It is a genuine and recognizable psychological type, carrying real gifts alongside its genuine practical difficulties, and understanding it as a coherent pattern rather than a personal failing can offer real relief from the shame that often accompanies feeling perpetually unable to stay grounded in ordinary practical reality the way other people seem to manage so easily. The genuine challenge for this type, according to Jung's understanding, was not to abandon the extraordinary visionary capacity that made them who they were, but to develop, alongside it, at least some modest capacity to actually connect their flooding inner images back to their own concrete life, their own physical needs, and the genuine feelings of the people around them who might otherwise experience their visionary absorption as a kind of neglect or abandonment. This is genuinely difficult, precisely because the very quality that makes this type so visionary, the tendency to perceive images as existing in their own right rather than as personally relevant messages, works directly against the grounding this type most needs to develop. For anyone who loves or works closely with an introverted intuitive type, Jung's description offers a useful corrective to a very natural but often unhelpful response. It is easy to become frustrated with this type's apparent obliviousness to practical concerns, their genuine difficulty translating brilliant inner insight into reliable everyday action, their seeming indifference to how their absorption in inner vision affects the people around them. Understanding that this pattern reflects a genuine and coherent psychological structure rather than simple carelessness or selfishness can help transform frustration into a more patient and more effective kind of support, one that gently helps this type build bridges between their genuine visionary gifts and the ordinary practical reality that other types manage far more naturally. Think honestly about whether you recognize this restless, image-chasing, physically ungrounded pattern in your own inner life, or whether you recognize it clearly in someone close to you whose brilliant insight often seems strangely disconnected from ordinary practical follow-through. Consider what it might look like to honor the genuine gift of this pattern while also patiently building at least some bridge back to the concrete, embodied, relational world that this type so often overlooks. If you recognize this pattern in yourself or someone close to you, write below the single word for the inner image or a possibility that currently feels most captivating and most disconnected from your ordinary daily life. Naming it honestly is often the first step toward finding some way to bring its genuine insight back down to earth. Because a visionary type Carl Jung described so carefully was never simply lost in useless fantasy, however it might appear from the outside. It was, he believed, perceiving something genuinely real and genuinely valuable that the rest of us, anchored so firmly in ordinary practical reality, are usually far too grounded to ever notice at all.